We are now live on Zoom, YouTube as well.
Yeah.
I'm muting all.
Yes, sir, you can mute and unmute everybody. Means you can mute everybody so that only host can unmute.
Anish, you have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
We will do now.
Yeah, the host now, which is good.
Shall we start, sir?
Yes, sir. May I request Vice Chairman Sundar Nurani to please start the proceedings.
Good morning to all of you. Welcome to the very interesting topic of today morning. I would like to welcome Mr. Osama Al Rahma, who is Head of Business in Business Development Emirates Islamic Bank, and Mr. Ahmad Kadli and Mr. Abhishek Jaju. They are from AJMS Global UAE. And welcome all the members, past chairman, and our guest for today's session. I would like to wish all of you happiness, because today we are celebrating the International Day for Happiness, and I could see a lot of people smiling. This is very important because when you are happy, you get the best productivity from everyone. Without further ado, I would like to thank all our sponsors for supporting the chapter in going ahead with the activities of the chapter. And again, welcome all the members. I hope that you all will get what you have been waiting from the speakers of today. And happy learning to all of you. Without further ado, I would like to request our chairman, Sri Anish Mehta, to deliver the chairman's address. Over to you, Chairman Saab.
1 second. Can you remove this PPT?
Yeah, I think Abhishek, if you can take out the presentation right now.
Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see so many of you, and now exactly 273 people this Saturday morning, where the contestants are ready for the nomination to be opening in the evening, and members are learning. So great to see all of you. I welcome all our eminent speaker, our keynote speaker, Mr. Osama Al Rahma, our eminent speakers, Mr. Abhishek Jaju, as well as Ahmed Fadli from AJMS. And while talking prior to joining here, Mr. Osama has promised that he will guide us, give us more insights on an ongoing basis. So Mr. Sundar Nurani, you can take care of that. Please invite him as much as possible. Thank you all. Today we are here, and this seems to be a very important topic, so we have to organize it, because as we all know, the deadline is March 31st, and therefore we are organizing so that our members can get their doubts clarified, because our eminent speakers will analyze this important topic as well as give us their insights as to the registrations and the regulation. We all know that Ministry of Economy has launched this campaign to encourage particularly designated non-financial business and professions to register in their approved systems, particularly to combat money laundering in the country. We all know this campaign, or what we say is the GoAML system, is an integrated digital platform through which suspicious transaction reports and suspicious activity reports can be submitted by the financial institutions and the other DNFBPs, which is like designated non-financial business and professions, to the relevant authorities. The Financial Intelligence Unit uses this information to quickly and efficiently receive, analyze, and distribute suspicious transaction reports. It's currently used by a large number of financial institutions worldwide, and the UAE is the first Gulf country to implement this modern system. So I think a lot of new things are there, and today, to understand this in detail and remove our doubts, we have eminent guest speakers who will take us through all the nitty-gritties of GoAML registration and reporting. I will encourage people to participate in the interactive discussions whenever the question and answer round is there, to clarify all your doubts and to proceed ahead with these important regulations And we all know UAE is becoming more and more regulated. So we all need to be keeping abreast with the changes. With this, I welcome each and every member. And probably this will be the last technical session before we go for the AGM. Hopefully, we still have 5 more days. If something else can be done, we will try to do it. But all the best to all the potential candidates for the upcoming elections, and all the best to all the members for the future endeavors. With this, over to Vice Chairman Saab.
Chairman, sir, thank you very much for the valuable insights. Yes, I mean, these are the deadline duly noted for March 31st. And we hope that, members will be able to clarify all their doubts from our valuable speakers today morning. So it is my task to introduce Mr. Osama Al Rahma. Mr. Osama Al Rahma joins Emirates Investment Bank as Head of Business Development. He has over 28 years of experience in financial sector, encompassing business and client relationship development. Prior to Emirates Investment Bank, Osama worked at Al Fardan Exchange LLC and Al Fardan Group since 1993 in many leadership roles and was CEO since 2011 and director at the group. He has occupied other roles such as Vice Chairman of Foreign Exchange and Remittances Group under the Dubai Chamber of Commerce. He was a former Vice Chairman of Dubai Quality Group. He holds a degree in Electronics Engineering and a postgraduate diploma in Management Studies from the University of Hull. He is also an alumnus of JF Kennedy School of Government's Executive Program in Leadership of Harvard University and holds a Harvard FinTech certificate. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Osama. Mr. Osama, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sundar. And thank you, Mr. Anish, Chairman, and wish you all the best in your contest coming over. And I believe this is one of the most reputed organizations we have here. I've been in touch in the past in a few sessions. I believe it's one of the most active, which contributes a lot to the leveling up all the knowledge and education around its own members. I'm really honored to be part of this session today, even it came on a very quick notification, but thanks again to Mr. Abhishek for his invitation and the role that AGMS is playing and contributing toward, bringing the practices along all members. Just before starting the presentation, which I will go on what we call it high level and then leave the technicalities to Mr. Ahmed Al-Fadli, who's an expert, and Mr. Abhishek. Understanding mainly, and we have gone when I was for the past 28 years, as you just mentioned, within the exchange companies. And the levels of what we are going now, we have gone through this one many years ago, actually. How we can bring the level of the standards of combating money laundering and the terrorist financing, and even proliferation of the financials, which we call it, which is another subject came now into our attention, and we need to address. We need to understand that United Arab Emirates is part of the global community. United Arab Emirates is now positioning itself with we are celebrating, as you all know, the 50 years of the anniversary this year being announced by His Highness the President Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan. And from April, the whole nation is celebrating the 50 years. Today, the positioning and the strategy of United Arab Emirates is to set itself as a global player, not only as a regional player. Understanding how it is important, the diversification of the economy taking place, and the long-term strategies adopted by the United Arab Emirates government. And we are very thankful to the leadership, which are trying to make it sure that all the activities within the economy is being contributing to the total GDP without relying on the oil as a main sector. And it's happening, as we all know. less than 35% is the total contribution of oil toward the GDP of UAE. Yes, all and most of the countries in the world is being suffered by the pandemic of the COVID-19. We know that the growth went negative by almost 6.5% in 2020. But as we saw in the previous days, and all of you are aware, is the forecast of 2021 and the full recovery by 2022 to the economy. And we are looking for a positive growth this year, but around 2% to 2.5%. And it might be more, depends on how we are handling the pandemic. And this is a unique issue. Now, why I'm bringing this issue, because yes, we are part of the whole system going on. Now, we saw how the government also, which we all have such confidence, being able to manage and tackle the pandemic, being proactive, how to balance between opening the businesses and between having vaccination of almost 7 million people within very short time, compared to so many other developed countries. We all know that today in Europe and other parts of the world, there's a lot of lockdowns taking place at the moment we are talking today in very developed countries. But down here, alhamdulillah, we were able to maintain, and the whole focus and the stimulus came from the government in a very early stage, pumping more than 256 billion dirham among the banking sector. All those issues just to make sure that the business activities, which we are all there, are trying to absorb such shock of the pandemic. Now, this brings our attention that the initiative of having the non-banking, non-financial business diligence to be part of the combating terrorist financing and combating money laundering is became essential, because as we know, we are part of this review of the Financial Action Task Force, which takes place on the global level. We have gone through that one in 2019. We were part. I was at that time still at the exchange, and still I am advising the FERG. But at that time, we were so active in the participation along with the FATF review and the conducting different workshops. When it comes to financial institutions, to be very open with you, it is more sophisticated, because we are talking about large number of transactions happening on daily basis, need to be looked after from what we call it real-time screening against so many issues. We look into the risk profiling of each single customer. You look to the purpose, you look to the source of funds. So many issues are there, and you are handling on mass numbers. So you need to have a very advanced, sophisticated systems. Why I'm telling you this, saying to make it now the contribution or the engagement to take place could be more easier when it comes to the non-financial sector. And here, where if you don't mind, Abhishek, if we can go to the slides, I will go on high level. So here, where we are looking to be part of what we call it, that the laws and regulations taking place among the all sectors in United Arab Emirates. Why? Because this became as part of the what we called it, the FATF reviews final report. And for UAE, we don't want to have any kind of what is considered as loopholes. So the international community, when it looks to us, it always has to look us that we are in bar with them on the level of compliance and full compliance within different sectors. Yes, that one to be addressed, it is an important. We need to understand that this is a responsibility to be part of the implementation and compliance of such initiatives of the laws taking place. It is not meant to make it difficult for businesses at all. It is meant, we need to understand that implementing those defined, like Article 2 of Law 20 on 2018, or other laws. It is about being able to how we see that, you know, those illicit money coming. And I don't think from ethical and from business sustainability, any businesses would be willing for having, you know, people smuggling or bribe or dirty money, you know, proceeds from drug trafficking or human trafficking or, you know, kidnapping or gambling, and it is beyond. And you today, all you know that it is not, this is the traditional one, but now even on the cyber crime level, there is a lot of things happening on the black net, and a lot of this, you know, the ransom malwares and other taking place, and we have seen biggest cases happening around the world, where those issues actually undermining all the other initiatives taking place to have a sustainable economy and to maintain the reputation of any society. Reputational risk is there, the damages, I mean, it is reputation risk. Now we talk first on nation level. You know, we don't want to, because once you don't want to act within a country or a nation which is considered as high risk. That makes your engagement, and we all know that all the activities here today is about the cross-border, about dealing with different economies, different countries. Now, reputational risk, something which you cannot build overnight. Once it is damaged, it is really a kind of a severe damage that takes place within an organization or individual or a nation. The financial risk, because we all know that, you know, the penalties and fines being applied from criminalization point of view is really huge. It is also the imprisonment and the legal risk along with it. The operational risk, which you all know, that it allows you know, your whole system to be exposed to unwanted things happening within out of your scope. And once you are within that loop, it is really difficult to maintain sustainability of any business. We have seen how this impacted earlier, you know, I mean, before just going to this, you know, you might be a few years ago, I made a few studies about the breachments happening within, for example, United States of America, and the penalties being applied for non-compliant of so many American financial institutions, as you might be also aware, it was amounting to multiple of billions of dollars applied by the US government and its other entities like the FinCEN and Treasury and other jurisdiction within New York on certain banks. One bank, for example, the last case back in 2017 was Deutsche Bank. It has around $7 billion. Before the bank of PNB Paribas, it was around $9 billion. Bank of America, Standard Chartered, you know, the Chase, you name it, this is the top banks which you know, HSBC, many banks has been, and you can go through this one. It's not about whom you are or how long you've been in business. This kind of small breaches can really, you know, brings you to very, very tough time. And it might not be, you might not be able to conduct business any longer again. Within the UAE has structured a clear, on a national level, clear strategy framework. And between the federal laws taking place, as we can see on this presentation, and the regulatory framework embedded by the introduction of the new AML. So the AML laws and the CFT, combating finance terrorism law, is being evolving in the past. Along with it, this all comes for the whole United Arab Emirates to be in bar with what is happening at the developed countries. And then we have the what we call the national risk assessment, which is there also to show us where are all the different activities which need to be considered as high risk or medium risk or low risk. And I would it is not the time to elaborate on this one, but it is good that we need to understand our part of activities depends on which activity you are in, how it's being categorized by the National Risk Assessment. And that makes the time you understand where are you categorized, it will create more understanding what kind of advanced regime you need to develop within your own organization to mitigate such risk happening. It is not something complicated we need to understand. It's a matter of having full understanding and awareness. I repeat, it is a matter of addressing those risks in clarity. It's a matter of having clear plans about mitigating such risk. It's a matter of creating a clear regime within your own business unit, which will give you kind of comfort. And then once you fulfill all those issues, you are fully okay to be part of the full compliant. What we call it, it's once you address your obligations from regulatory point of view, you are already there, to be able to address those issues. And then, God forbid, anything goes wrong, you will be well protected by law itself. So can we go to the other slide, Mr. Alushi? So I have touched on this one about the FATF and the review which took place. Huge, to be very open with you, the central bank, when it comes to the financial institutions like banks and exchange houses, finance companies, and other related entities under the Central Bank of Uae, they have taken a very, very big efforts and huge efforts in the past many years. Myself, the first ever workshop I participated, it was back in 1998, even before that kind of clear definitions of what we call it money laundering. So we can understand, the big efforts was happening and raising up the awareness, the workshops being conducted, the different levels of amended rules and regulations until we reach to the latest rules and regulation. Now, for the non-financial one, it is under the Ministry of Economy. It's been clearly defined that we need actually to comply with those issues to fulfill that kind of observation happened by the FATF review recently. Can we go to the second? So as we mentioned, the central bank we have the implementation authorities, which is the Central Bank of Uae, and all the financial institutions they have to be licensed by central bank. Within the central bank, there is what we call it the Financial Intelligence Department, and which all the reports of the suspected transactions goes to this unit. This unit has a connection with the global similar FIDs and also with law enforcement and others. And when we say suspicious transaction, it means we are not able within all kind of, when then later on my colleagues will come and elaborate, when you conduct all your due diligence and all the triggers of defining what we call a suspicious transaction is there, that makes you to report such issue, which will need, it doesn't mean it is a real case. It means there is a suspicious that it might be a case of money laundering or a breach or any kind of other illicit activities. And then we leave it to those people. So here, when we say there is a dedicated financial intelligence department or unit within that one, which means those people is their role and their scope of work is to go beyond what we which we cannot know about. So people about establishment, about business activities, about different, because whatever information you are collecting is based on the good faith which you have, which you validate. But sometimes you need more analytical tools, you need more what we call it intelligence around it. So you are not requested to become detective, as we keep saying to our compliance departments earlier in financial institutions. You are there to understand the whole landscape of each transaction and the people and the ultimate beneficiary around it. But then later on, you have also dedicated people. They have investigators. They have their access. They have their. So you feel also a comfort once you do that one, and from regulatory point of view, once you take that one to you escalate it as an STR, then you took out of your shoulder that obligation of negligence or of allowing certain illicit activities to take place, because you already made your obligation from regulatory point of view. FATF, as we know, is the Financial Action Task Force, which became the standard of, you know, when the countries were having the issue of anti-money laundering, it has to be standardized worldwide. We cannot have different definitions or different concepts or different implementations. And then the FATF became the agreed standardized rules and regulation, and what we call it the 40 recommendation about the main guidelines which need to be embedded within each jurisdiction laws, and it has to fulfill those recommendations within the internal laws and regulation of each jurisdiction or each country. And then in order to see the overall landscape, whether the real implementation is taking place, the FATF is conducting every few years kind of a review on the countries, on their financial institutions, including on their central banks, and reviewing all those issues, and then establishing a report about each country, which you can on Google, you can go and you can see the rating and the reports of each country is being published, you know, for that one. And then each other institutions along in the world will look into those one, and they will start to categorize this country, whether it is a high risk country, it is a fully implementing. So you have some countries are on really, you know, on the red radar and on the blacklist, or, you know, which you cannot deal with. There are countries which you cannot, you know, because it is totally out of any implementation. So that is something which, if you start dealing with entities within those countries, you already subject yourself to a high risk of being in breach of certain laws and regulation. Those kind of issues, it is agreed on, and there is other organizations as well, like the Augmented Group and others. But now the international community came together in order to establish this kind of standardization, which made the life actually for all the other institutions around the world to understand that they are doing their activities within agreed jurisdictions, and everybody is respecting the level of implementation. We can go to the second slide, please. Within United Arab Emirates, there is now a clear structure about how we are handling. So we need to know that this is a serious issue. It is taken place by the whole government, the federal government, including the local governments, the law enforcement, and the other bodies and entities. And I don't want to elaborate within this one, but we do have what we call it the higher committee for supervising the national strategy of anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. And we have the National Anti-Money Laundering and the Combating Financing of Terrorism and Illegal Organization Committee as well. And now recently, you might be all aware, within the cabinet of the Prime Minister, now belongs to the Prime Minister office, they have established an office also overseeing the anti-money laundering and combating terrorist financing. So, which means that, and other than other entities which you can see here, I don't want to go through every single one, but just to understand that the UAE government has established, and some of these are headed by, one is headed by His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, on the national level, and then all entities, government representatives there, security and other law enforcement are there as well. So we need to understand how serious United Arab Emirates is taking such initiatives and making sure that we are recognized by the international community as a leading country in having, first of all, a clear-cut rules and regulations governing all those aspects, but at the same time, ensuring that the implementation of those rules and regulations are taking place by every single activity or business within United Arab Emirates. And here, where is the role of all of you within your own business units, regardless what kind of activity, how you are adopting to such rules and regulation. It is very important to understand that when the government take such initiative to establish all these entities headed by supreme people and by their highnesses, it is not there to be just for the sake of having such bodies, but it is there to have a real implementation of those laws and regulations. And just most of you might understand, you have seen in the newspapers earlier how almost more than 50 million dirhams penalties being applied by the central bank on banks. And earlier there was almost 1.5 million on 2 exchange houses, and there are another exchange houses just for the not full implementation. Doesn't mean they don't have, they do have all those finances they have, but when there is kind of weaknesses in the level of implementation, the law allows today, the new central bank law allows the central bank to apply immediately such penalties on those institutions. And speaking about such, hefty penalties, means this is one point. And this started actually a couple of years ago by establishing what we call the enforcement division at the central bank, which means for those who cannot really, and they have these very big weaknesses within their regimes, they will be and don't do remedies within certain time frames, they will be penalized. Can we go to the second slide, please? Yes, good. This is very good things, because now I see Mr. Ahmed Al Fadli. And just to conclude, my message to all of you, I've been myself, part of certain, even on international level, delegations along with officials tackling the same issue, including with the central bank delegation. It's a matter of, alhamdulillah, here we are in United Arab Emirates. I can say when it comes to laws and regulations, we are really advanced. We are really aware. We are really in position to be in bar with what is happening on most advanced countries. It's a matter of the level of implementation. And then here where the realities comes when you start practicing those issues. My last message, those rules and regulations is not meant at all to make the life of the people difficult, because sometimes we don't have this full awareness about it. We feel it might be difficult. It might make our business, shrinking, or no, it is not there. It is only once you adjust yourself, you will be living within what we call it a more clear environment from which gives you more clarity from sustainability point of view, from mitigating a clear risk which might damage your reputation, which makes you also within the legal and regulatory framework in a very comfort zone, knowing yourself that you are complying with all those rules and regulations. I wish you all, sorry, maybe I took longer time than what I supposed to do, Sorry, Abhishek, for that one, but you didn't remind me to stop speaking.
No,
But I hope that the message is clear, and will be more than happy to answer the simple question, difficult question. I sent it to Ahmed Al-Fadli and Abhishek. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. Osama, and good comments on the chat. One comment by our member Praveen Mehta, who says that I don't know whether you'll elaborate or someone else, but it says request speakers to kindly elaborate how we can attract investments in UAE while complying with this law. So this,
yeah,
and there is one more. Yeah, but I'll just say there is one more comment. He says, will the speakers provide any case studies on how money launderers will use or use the system to convert or transfer funds?
Yes, that is coming, I believe, in the slides about all those details. But and actually, this law is and this is good. The question, the first one. Now I am in the investment bank, as you know. I am in Emirates Investment Bank, which is part of my role is to develop those kind of attracting investments. But having such system within our country actually allows more investment to take place, because those top institutional investors in the world, which is directing their investment to different jurisdictions, one of their criteria and ratings is about how this country is complying with the FATF laws, and what is the rating from FATF about this country. That is actually one of the main initiatives of the UAE government, because it is relying on the the direct investment toward UAE, and UAE is positioning itself to attract more investment, and this is part of their initiatives toward encouraging more investments. But we want the clear investment. We don't want the illicit proceeds to come to us.
I hope Praveen Mehta.
With regards to
yes, sir. Please go ahead.
With regards to the second part of the question pertaining to case studies, we have covered 5 sample case studies as part of the third segment. So before the question and answer round, but obviously detailed case studies and everything has been provided by the supplement guidance of Ministry of Economy themselves, and which is quite detailed also. There are almost more than 50 case studies they have shared. So I'll encourage every member to also refer that for detailed review, but we'll cover the case study.
Okay, there is one question from one of our members, Mr. Mohandas Balakrishnan. He says, what kind of protection they will give when auditor reports such suspicious transactions? So, should we take later on or right now?
If it is fine, can I? No, I can answer. Is it fine if I take up this question to the other?
Go ahead, Mr. Abhishek. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So, if you read the supplement guidance, one of the major things is obviously, whenever we report this, how the law protects us. So, non-retaliation and especially from the whistleblowing point of view, there are certain protection points which has been mentioned in the supplement guidance. And just to elaborate that, one of the major things which they have said that as part of your normal ongoing reporting, whether you are an auditor or you are working within the organization, the law of the land precedes over everything, and the reporting should be kept confidential. And even if there is any violation and you are reporting to any of the other ministry, don't mention about the reporting which you have done for FIU. That's something which they have mentioned it clearly. It will be a communication through the GoAML platform between the registered party and the FIU, and it should be kept confidential, neither shared with the client, neither with any other authority, just to keep the confidentiality of the matter. Does this answer your question?
Yeah, so there is a follow-up question on this, that what if that suspicious transaction reported turn out to be a normal transaction?
The guidance clearly says that it is this, the quality of the STR is very important. We should, and in fact, even in the financial institution, when this was implemented, a lot of times people reported whether whether it was a normal transaction or a suspicious transaction. It really depends on two things. One is how you train your staff, because your staff should also understand what kind of internal reporting STR they should be doing it to the organization or to the nominated compliance officer. And the second is they have also created a position for compliance officer for DNFBPs to ensure that the compliance officer are well educated enough to report the right kind of STRs. In addition to that, they have also given a lot of red flag indicators, be it for the auditors, be it from gold sector, or be it from real estate. These are the major sectors they have focused. For the legal, Ministry of Economy is not providing guidance. It is coming under the Ministry of Justice. So they are following those guidelines. There are certain exceptions which has been given for the lawyer profession as per the guidance section number 7. But overall, whether it comes out to be normal transaction, there is no, you should have proper audit trail and documentation of why you reported and internal approval on the reporting part to safeguard your interest. That's what would be the message.
Great. I think remaining questions we can take after your session, Abhishek, and the other session as well. So
Sure.
over to you, Sundar sir.
Thank you, Chairman Saab. Thank you, Mr. Osama, for the valuable insights and the keynote address. I would request Rajiv Hira to introduce our second speaker of the day. Rajiv, over to you.
Thanks, Sundar Saab. So with us, we have Mr. Ahmed. So Ahmed is a professional who has worked in several years in the Northern America and Middle East also. So he has a very versatile experience, I can say. He has worked in the corporate banking division and also as a supervision and regulatory financial institutions. So he has active role of the doer and the verifier, or you can say a supervisory role also. He has worked in various functions as I can read out from a profile which talks from lending to SME to financial analyst to relationship management. So a complete vast experience. And I can say the most important thing which we are looking at from here is he has worked with the UAE Central Bank as a senior manager, senior examiner, and he has the experience of looking at the cases at the practical level. And I'm sure we are going to get a lot of perspective from him. And he was appointed as a Ministry of Justice, within Ministry of Justice, as a court expert in financial crime investigations also. So AML, sanctions, whatever we talk, it has a lot of things to do with, one, knowing the business, second, regulating, and third, analyzing and investigating also. So I think all the good qualities or all the key points are being already ticked with Mr. Ahmed. Looking forward for a great session from Mr. Ahmed on this. Over to you, Mr. Ahmed.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Ahmed,
Yes,
if
sir.
I just take half a minute and
Please.
just to say thank you to Mr. Osama and just share our token of appreciation to him.
First.
Mr.
That's
Osama,
mine.
this is for you. Thank you so much.
And my appreciation also to Mr. Osama, who I know him for the last 20 years, and my all respect to him also.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Osama. Shukran.
I think you are on mute probably. We're not able to.
Thank you
listen to
very
Mr.
much. Thank you very much.
Most welcome,
Mr.
sir.
Anish. Really, I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
Shukran, sir. Masalam.
Now, Mr. Ahmed,
Yes,
I'm
sir.
not sure. I'm not able to see your video, so just see if
My
we can
video, you mean the camera or?
camera, yeah.
I am sure I already turned it on, but let me check, sir.
I think video is on. Just check the camera. It looks like there is some sticker or something there.
On the camera, you mean? Like?
On
Yeah,
the left.
maybe cover is there on the laptop.
No, there is no cover, but can you see me now or?
No.
Because your video is still on.
1 second.
Okay.
Can you start now?
Yeah. Okay, now. Is that okay, sir?
No, we can't see you, sir.
I think we can see you on the presentation, but not on the camera.
Okay.
I think we'll go ahead with this then.
Okay, then. No problem. And then I'll see how it can be fixed later, sir. Okay,
Yes,
so
yes.
thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And thanks to all the participants and those who invited us, of course. My role will be to talk about the applicable laws and guidelines in the UAE. Okay, Before we start, I just would like to give you a brief history of AML in the UAE, as well as when I worked before the UAE, probably around 20 years in North America before I came here. So I joined a bank in 1986, and the laws and regulations there were not as strict as it is right now. Now, for example, when I send money to my family in Canada, many questions, many verifications has to be done. Where do I work? Why do I work? What is the purpose of sending them even any amount of money? It was not like that in 1986, in the 90s. Things were easier, more relaxed, but as you can see, there is always progression and always developments in that. Same here as the UAE. I joined here the UAE Central Bank in 1999. Okay, there was no criminalization at that time of money laundering. Okay, there was no law for money laundering, nothing to legally say. The first law was introduced in 2002. After September 11, we found, I was working, like I said, in Central Bank. Immediately 1 week after, people from CIA, FBI, Federal Reserve all came to the UAE, met with us for the full day for almost 2 weeks. And then after that, we exchanged views, and then the law number 4, the first law of anti-money laundering, was issued in 2002. Of course, that law was frequently updated until it was finally replaced by the Decree Federal Law number 20 of 2018. And then, as you can see here, it's 2018. Then the cabinet of the UAE issued notices to explain that law. Notice number 10, notice number 79, those were issued in 2019, like 1 year after that law was issued. Not year exactly, but in the next year. And then there were, again, guidelines for designated non-financial businesses and professions. Okay, that was also introduced, and the cabinet decision number 58, as we will address later, as well as the cabinet decision number 74 that we will also make reference to. So again, as you can see, Financial Action Task Force came up with 40 recommendations. When they were established in 1989, they issued 40 recommendations for the world, okay, to fight money laundering. One of those recommendations is every country has to set up inside that country to establish a financial intelligence unit. Okay, so again, that unit, it was also in the UAE Central Bank under a different name. If many of you may remember, AML, SCU, Anti-Money Laundering, and Special Cases Unit. Okay, so again, we are going to talk about the National Risk Assessment, who performs that National Risk Assessment. And this is done now by the, as you can see, there is the federal law, Federal Decree Law number 20 of 2018. Okay. Again, UAE Central Bank issues the regulations for financial institutions, also sets up penalties, as was mentioned by Mr. Osama earlier. There were so many penalties imposed, large amounts on financial institutions, be it banks, exchange houses, for, as he mentioned, and it is very correct, that they were, again, implementing AML guidelines, but not fully, and that's why they were penalized. Again, one of the observations done by FATF is that there is international cooperation built in the FIU, the Financial Intelligence Unit, but it should be used more and more, and asking and giving more information to counterparts in other jurisdictions. Again, we are going to talk about the confidentiality of STRs. You were mentioning a portion of STR, I believe, in one of the questions. Again, let me stress here that STRs are very confidential, and they are only to be shared with the FIU. Even us, when I was working as an examiner, we were not allowed to see the contents of STR. And This I would like to clarify because this is an institute of chartered accountants. Probably when they are doing the auditing of financial institutions, they ask them to see their STRs in order to ensure compliance. But again, they cannot see the content of the STR, only the title, headers, reference number, dates, that's about it, but content and details, no, they're not allowed to do it. Even central bank examiners are not allowed to do it. Okay, so we are going to talk about roles and responsibilities of financial institutions and DNFBPs, the designated non-financial businesses and professions. And again, there is a national committee for combating money laundering headed by His Excellency, the Governor of the UAE Central Bank. And then, as I said, the FIU is in Central Bank. It has been there for years, since way back then, but it was under a different name. If many of you remember AML-SCU, but now the name is has been changed, but the same function of FIU, which is Financial Intelligence Unit. Can you move to the next slide, please? Okay. Now, this is a brief description of what are the DNFBPs. They are brokers, real estate agents, dealers in precious metals, the lawyers, notaries, legal professionals, and providers of corporate and services trusts. Okay, of course, accountants and auditors are included. And so what are they expected to do? They are expected to ensure the implementation of the AML CFT requirements, regulations, and laws mentioned in law number 20. And as you can see in the slide in front of you, the cabinet decision number 10 that came to explain and elaborate on what was mentioned in the law number 20. So again, they asked organization to assess the risks of money laundering crime in their entity, and then trying to, after identifying that, what kind of risk, to evaluate that risk, okay, and then to mitigate the risk, try to minimize the risk, put the controls in order to minimize that risk. And then we are going to talk about know your customer as a requirement. Now all entities have to know whichever customer they are dealing with. So it's a basic requirement now that is applied to everyone. And then customer due diligence, the staff in the entity, starting from the compliance department, everybody has to work on obtaining customer information and do their own due diligence for that, for natural persons, and of course enhanced due diligence for other companies, and when there is high risk, as we will talk about later. KYC, which is know your customer, customer due diligence, legal persons, and identification of UBOs. That we will talk about when we talk about the cabinet decision number 58. It's very important now to know who is the true owner of the transaction, who is the true owner of the business or the funds, okay? Because many people are behind the curtains and they put someone in the front line to be just the name put on the license, but in fact there is other people at the background who are the true owners who control that business, and the UAE, being aware of that, the cabinet issued the notice number 58 to deal with that, and they say entities should try to work on identifying who is the ultimate beneficial owners. They give parameters, as we will talk about later. STRs, anytime there is suspicion about any transaction, okay, there is an internal process called ISTR, Internal Suspicious Transaction Reporting, that should be done by the people in the organization, refer it to the compliance officer or MLRO, who will then determine whether to proceed and report that STR or Suspicious Transaction Report to the Financial Intelligence Unit. Documents of transactions should be kept for a minimum of 5 years, as mentioned here. And anytime within this period, anybody from the authorities or regulators will ask for information. They expect to find it because within that time period, those documents should be easily retrievable and given to whoever regulatory or authority body or bodies that ask for. PEPs, which are again something that is now mandatory to screen for them. Not all PEPs again are criminals, but some of the PEPs again realize that they use their influence to again obtain funds illegally by using their position. So again, those are to be checked. The name screening of those PEPs is to be done in while identifying there is a PEP. Again, immediately they have to screen and get management approval to establish any business relationship with a PEP, be it domestic and or foreign PEP. Organizations, entities have to appoint a person to be responsible for ensuring the implementation of anti-money laundering rules and regulations. And that person is also responsible for reporting suspicious transaction, liaising with the regulatory authorities. So he will be the focal point. That person is the compliance officer. Some people will call it MLRO, but that's the same thing. And some entities will rely on third parties to do compliance, to do CDD. So again, it is very important to ensure that it is done properly, whether it's done inside the organization or been outsourced by someone else to be appointed to do this. Internal supervision and policies, all entities again have to be setting up their own policies and procedures of dealing with the ML, anti-money laundering, and combating the financing of terrorism. And of course, the regulatory authorities will come and check and inspect those policies and procedures to ensure that they are on the same line that is required and set by the laws, regulations, and cabinet decisions. Okay, can you have the next slide, please? Hello? Yeah. So again, applicabilities of AML laws, they apply to, as you can see, to almost all financial institutions and designated non-financial businesses and professions. I have to mention here that, again, that law of number 20 of 2018 is, again, applicable in the whole UAE, including the financial free zones. So again, the IFC and again, Abu Dhabi Global Market, again, fall under that law. It's a federal law, okay? That law applies to the, again, auditors, accountants, lawyers, company trust, dealers in precious metals, real estate, and agents and brokers, okay? And again, if Mr. Abhishek, if you can move this forward. Okay, so we'll talk about the cabinet decision number 58. That decision from the cabinet in the UAE elaborates on identifying who is the ultimate or true beneficial owner of the transaction. Who owns the fund? Who is the true business owner? So again, they said, for example, anybody who owns 25% ownership, direct or indirect ownership, will be deemed ultimate beneficial owner. If someone owns 25% of voting power, again, will be ultimate beneficial owner. Listed companies are exempted on the stock exchange. Why? Because again, there is plenty of information obtained from the stock exchange for them to register. So again, they say we have enough information about the listed companies. And again, if it's an entity owned directly or indirectly by the federal or emirate government, it is again exempted from that. If after applying those parameters, you are unable to identify that ultimate beneficial owner, then that ultimate beneficial owner could be the senior most official person in the company, be it a CEO, CFO, whatever. If you are unable to identify him through applying the parameter of 25% ownership or voting power or all these things. Okay. Again, next slide. Yeah. Again, because of similarity of names, all this information has to, because for example, Ahmad Muhammad can be with 10 people. So again, you have to obtain the full name. Maybe there are 5 people with the same Ahmad Muhammad name. So again, how to differentiate with them? Look at their nationality, probably coming from the same country, Ahmad Muhammad. So again, look at the date of birth. So they, again, chances are all of them have the same date of birth, will be small chance. Place of birth, again, address. Now here we have to make sure that once you obtain the address, people with the same name, same nationality, same date of birth cannot have the same address. Also ID information, ID, Emirates ID number, passport number, all this. So that is why all this information is required, because when you do a name screening, you will have a name similar to other names on the database. But in order to make sure you say, okay, I'll look at the nationality, I'll look at the date of birth, and that's how you eliminate them. So that is why all this information is required. And then starting of becoming a UBO, because that person could be the owner, ultimate beneficial owner, for 2 or 3 years. But then he cut the relationship with the entity, so he's no longer a UBO. Then that date should also be identified. Okay, Mr. Abhishek. Now, here we are going to talk about Cabinet Decision number 74. Entities are required to register on a website in order to obtain notices regarding addition and deletion of names, okay, and to inspect the database regularly for any addition, to ensure that if they added more names or deleted names, that name is no longer there, and to perform immediate search on intimation received for a listing of an individual, for example, or entity, to okay, for the freezing procedure in the event of any. Okay, and then once you are registered, you will search the search the customers database, search for names related to their customers, transactions, or related parties. Search for names for potential customers. And can you move to the next slide, please? And register on the site to obtain the notice. Make sure that there are always updates coming through notices. So again, once you register, you are registering to make sure that you obtain those notices and additions and those new names that come on the notices, and conduct your own search of customers in the databases, the beneficiaries, before commencing any transaction. So as you can see, it's very important to register on that portal. Freezing of funds, of course, here the freezing, they are talking about financial institutions, to freeze the funds, and for 1 week or 7 days, 7 working days as required by the UAE Central Bank. After that, in order to add more days or more time, then again the prosecution or a court order has to be obtained. Search if it is become evident that a former customer that was again a regular customer, nothing bad on that customer, came to be listed on becomes a sanction. And then of course you make sure that there is no tipping off. Tipping off is a serious crime. Again, they warn against it. Nobody is allowed to inform any customer or any person about their transaction being under reviewed with the regulatory authorities, with any law enforcement. So again, tipping off is a serious crime. And again, you ensure that you have to give full cooperation with the regulators and law enforcement bodies. Okay. Now I hand it over to Mr. Abhishek. If you have any questions for now or at the end of the session, I'll be glad to answer any.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed,
You're welcome, sir.
for the wonderful session.
Thank you, sir.
We have few questions. Rajiv, maybe you can take it up.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Before that, I think Anish want to give some message. Anish?
No, I think we can take questions, then felicitate, and then we can do
Perfectly
that.
fine. So, Mr. Ahmed, thank you very much for bringing up a lot of connecting points. So there is one question which is coming
Welcome,
from
sir.
Joseph Philip.
Yes, sir.
In an LLC, typically where 51% shareholding is held by the UAE national and 49% by expat. However,
Yes.
the structure as they are commenting is 100% beneficial owner is expat. So will UAE national be considered as a UBO in this case, or how should it be mentioned? So that's a question from Philip, Joseph Philip.
So will the UBO also be they are partners, correct?
Yeah, there is a 49% being held by the expat, 51% by UAE national.
Yes.
However, with the kind of operations, they believe that 100% is held by the expat.
By the expat. Is there any proof of that?
I think to put on very straight, I think there are side agreements which gives 100% beneficial ownership to the expat person.
But side agreements, like were they witnessed by anybody, or just you assume that there is a side agreement?
I believe generally they are not legalized.
Not legalized. So again, they can just between both of them and nobody else will be able to see it, correct?
Yes.
Well, then, like I say, the law will not make it responsible, because, for example, when I was a central bank examiner, there could be such agreements. But again, we only look at the documents in front of us. We do not assume that, no, this person is the 100%, and they, for example, like you mentioned here in this example, the local is just giving the name only, but the true ownership is for the expat. How can we prove that?
Yeah.
Okay, unless we are
legally you
able
can't
to prove
it.
Yeah, unless we can able to prove it, because any lawyer can say, okay, prove it, show me. If you have any proof or evidence, show us. And if you cannot in court, again, it will be very difficult to stand in court this thing. So again, you go by the what's in the paper and what's in front of the judge in terms of documents.
So which means substance over form is not applicable. Form is also important here.
The substance over form, again, unless you can prove it, sir. Okay? But if you are unable to prove it, it could be an assumption only. And a lawyer will tell you, you are only assuming this. Okay?
Right.
Just can I add one more point to this?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So when we identify UBO, there are two ways, two sides of the coin. One is when we identify and report our company UBOs to the regulators or the supervisory authority. So obviously, when we declare and when we do these undertakings, those documents have been kept with us, who is actually the ultimate beneficiary owner according to us. So obviously we are declaring that. So that document becomes very important, that how you have declared it to your supervisory authority. As everybody knows, there are certain deadlines, be it Dubai Economy, be it Jabza Authority, everybody is requesting the entities to provide that. So that becomes going forward as one of the evidence, that how the organization has declared themselves, self-declaration has been done. The other is from the perspective when we, from a financial institution, when we look at it, there are two specific documents we always focus on. One is the MOA, whether the MOA for a LLC company defines with clarity who has the powers, in terms of running of the organization. Although the local may own 51%, but we always do enhanced due diligence on the expatriate who runs the business. And for the local, we may go ahead with the CDD requirement. So it really depends on the scenario where you are setting and how you would be, because there might be power of attorneys which are notarized, which are legalized, where the local may give full power of attorney to the expat to manage. So these are certain documents can be looked at, but obviously thorough due diligence has to be done before you conclude. It cannot be a generic answer whether.
So basically it will be on case-to-case basis, yeah.
Not
Yeah.
only that, sir, but as Mr. Abhishek mentioned, if there are power of attorney, they made the expat and the local owner made an agreement between them and made a power of attorney. But again, that power of attorney was not again shared with you or available to you. How would you know? Okay,
Right.
unless you ask them really in black and white, is there any power of attorney given to that person from the local owner? And in that case, of course, that will be the evidence. But if
Very true.
again there is nothing, how can you prove it?
And
Like that.
also we need to see what that power attorney actually gives powers,
Exactly,
like which
sir.
powers. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you
sir.
very much. I
You're
think
welcome.
now we have one question from Hari Kishan Rakawat. Hari Kishan, can you please go ahead? We also have many other hand raised, so we'll take one by one.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Fadli. I think
Good
you
morning,
had
sir.
a great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you,
have
sir.
just one generic question, like accountants are also included in the definition of DNFBP. So
Yes.
my question is whether all the accountants working as an employee in the private sector are also supposed to register on GoAML and file STR whenever there is a suspicious transaction?
All accountants mean like if a company, for example, has 20 accountants, okay,
Yeah.
all of them you mean have to be? No, of course not. Okay,
Okay.
they are talking about an accounting firm here.
Okay.
Okay, public accountants who are doing this, they have to register because again, suspicious transactions from their clients have to be reported to FIU. But for if that company, for example, if it's a big a public accounting firm, okay, operates in all the Emirates and they have 50 staff, it doesn't mean that all of the 50 staff have to again register with the GoAML system.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome, sir. Can you see the video now or not? Because I'm not sure if it's.
No, I think one
I
of the
can see-
members is mentioning that probably your other application with the camera is also on. So maybe you have to close some application.
Other application.
Or maybe you can log out and then log in again.
No problem.
I'll
So,
try while Mr. Abhishek is giving his presentation.
Yeah, I think let us take some questions.
Yeah.
Mr.
Balaji, you
Nasir
are
Mohammed.
okay.
Yeah, Mr. Ahmad Fadi, thanks for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, sir, very much.
Yeah. So my question is on in the Federal Decree Law, Article number 18 says, lawyers, notaries, other legal professionals, and independent legal auditors shall be exempted from this provision if the information related to these operations have been obtained subject to professional confidentiality. So that means by signing any non-disclosure, can these professionals, DNBFs, can get away from their
There is
responsibility?
a private relationship between the lawyer and the client. Okay.
Yeah, suppose typically there is, I presume it is a NDA that we sign, non-confidentiality, non-disclosure. So
Yes.
by signing this, you are actually under legal obligation not to share the information.
Again, this will be again decided by the court. If this falls under the confidential, say, look, I am bound not to say anything, just like the doctor-patient relationship. Okay, again, this is something very confidential, unless there is a court order that really forces the doctor to disclose. Go ahead, sir. You want to say something?
Yeah, but the
Yeah.
DNFBPs, they don't want to go to the court to be proved that, whether they are under obligation to disclose or not disclose, because this article clearly says if it exempts if you have signed the confidential non-disclosure agreement.
Because you will have to take it to the
Yeah,
judge ultimately. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, sir. Say that. What you want to add?
I think the article
Abhishek.
which has been, yeah, hi, this is Abhishek here. The article which has been referred by you says, talks about the legal profession because there is a client confidentiality because they are representing the case of their clients in front of that. If you add this article along with the additional guidelines on DNFBP, which is article number 7.6, which talks about specific exemptions from the reporting requirement, it clearly says from the customer's legal position, defending or representing them before judiciary authority, like Mr. Fadli was mentioning, or in arbitration. So maybe article 7.6 plus maybe you can also add one more supplementary guidance to auditors where it is clearly written that as part of your auditing, whether it is financial, whether it is internal operational audit or compliance audit. If you identify something which is against or which is contravened compared to the law, or as well as the Companies Act also, you have 10 days reporting to report it to the relevant authority, and with regards to AML to FIU, which should not be disclosed. So what I'm trying to say is that your point of the law has to be looked into how it is getting implemented to see whether it is applicable to the auditors or not. So the exemption to the law has been given for lawyers specifically who are dealing or representing or consulting or doing legal due diligence on behalf of that client. And again, this is not tackled by Ministry of Economy. This is separate circular by Ministry of Justice, which focuses on that. But if you combine all these three articles, it clarifies that as part of your reporting obligations, auditors also as a profession have to report if they find anything suspicious. There is a whole list of red alerts which has been given in the supplementary guidance for the auditor.
Now, the article says it covers independent legal auditors as well.
Yeah, so if you look at 7.6, it says, and then the definition clearly says what kind of transaction it is. And again, when they say the legal auditor, it is further clarified in the supporting guidance of auditors. So if you want, I can refer the article also. Can you open the auditor's guidance? So we can refer the article number also. So yeah, this one. Correct. There is an exception which is clearly specified that auditors is part of that. Can you go down?
Yeah, it says many places that DNFBs are responsible. But
No. There is a supplementary guidance of for auditors where say auditors own assessment 11.7.3 talks about what is the professionals have to do, and then there are certain who are considered as auditors as part of that is also mentioned financial audit. So if you go to page number 4 and 5, it covers that way. So it's a absolutely valid question. When the word independent legal audit comes, it is exempted why we should report. But then the clarifications have come in the supplementary guidance where they have clearly mentioned that as an auditor, as part of your ongoing assignments also, if we identify something which is suspicious transaction, we should be part of reporting. We will not be under the exemption side.
So Abhishek, you can share that later on and we can circulate to everyone.
Sure. There are three guidance which has to be looked into from auditor's perspective. We'll share that.
One question on Article 8 that says that, the precious metals or currency that we are taking out or bringing in have to be disclosed. So is there any limit given for this?
Abhishek, what I propose is, since we have only 10 minutes to left for the session of viewers, because we need to close at 12:30, we will go ahead and probably Nasir Mohammed Saab can discuss with you on one-to-one basis.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Sure.
I think there are other questions, but I think let's first complete the presentation.
Yeah.
And after that, we can take all the questions together. I hope Mr. Fadli will be there with us till that time.
I am, sir. I am here.
That's great.
I'm just going to sign out and log in again. Hopefully that camera will work then.
Inshallah.
And before you go, this certificate is for you, sir. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Very kind of you.
Yeah. And very quickly, I'll also take 1 minute. Mr. Vice Chairman in his address has covered that today is the 20th March. Do we know which day today is?
Reporting day.
No, it's not reporting day.
Happiness Day. Happiness Day.
So yeah, it's International Day of Happiness, and I've just prepared 2 slides. So
excellent.
You are able to see this?
Yes. That's right. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So this is for all the members. Wishing you all International Day of Happiness on 20th March.
Same to
and
you.
I like this quote very much, that happiness doesn't depend on what we have, but it does depend on how we feel toward what we have. We can be happy with little and miserable with much. And then you can also go through this 10 habits of happiness. And I'm sure this everyone will correlate that definitely if we follow these 10 principles or 10 habits, we can be happy.
Excellent.
So wishing everyone International Day of Happiness.
Thank you, sir.
Over to you, Vice Chairman Saab. once again.
Thank you, Anish. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed, for the wonderful presentation. Now we have, can I invite Mr. Rajiv Hira to introduce Abhishek? Everybody knows Abhishek, but we need to follow the protocol. So over to you, Rajiv.
Thanks, Sundar Saab, and thanks, Anish, for bringing the happiness subject. So Abhishek, we already started hearing from him. I think we know the depth of his knowledge and understanding. So Abhishek is a serial entrepreneur, and he has immense experience in all the regulatory impacts. So he's also a co-founder with the am I unmuted?
No, we can listen.
You are on spotlight.
Fine. Under the leadership, AJMS has grown leaps and bounds. So they're already present in 5 countries, and he's heading the UAE office. He's a co-founder and partner of TruAct, which is again an IFRS 17 solution for insurance sector. So Abhishek has immense experience. I can talk about in the RegTech sector, AML, CDD, EDD, KYC remediation, compliance, risk management, and stress testing and corporate governance. So I think Abhishek, we heard a lot from you, and a lot of people are eagerly looking for a structured session also now from your side. Over to you, Abhishek.
Thank you, Mr. Rajiv. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Sundar, Vice Chairman, also for kindly arranging the session in such a short notice. I hope this would provide the much value addition which we want to achieve out of the session. So without further ado, I'll just try to share my screen, and we will jump into the GoAML side of the piece and the compliance requirement for all the DNFBPs, including the auditors. So before I start, it is very important that why all of a sudden this regulation which came out on top of the law in 2018 and the Cabinet Resolution number 10 of 2019, which focuses on DNFBP, why all of a sudden after 2 years this has become an important topic, and why 31st March 2021 is a very critical date. The reason is that Ministry in the month of Feb has acted upon the report, as Mr. Osama mentioned about there was a national risk assessment which was done by FATF, which is Financial Action Task Force, which looks after the implementing guidelines for all the global organization in terms of the AML. So they actually in their report of UAE found out deficiencies in these sectors which they wanted to amend. Although my colleagues who are working in DIFC or ADGM would have already heard about these terminologies, which was quite prevalent before this came into focus from the local law perspective. But now since it is a federal law and the implementation guidelines are here, Ministry of Economy in the month of Feb acted upon it and came out with 4 circulars focusing specific to real estate brokers, dealers in precious stones, metals, accountant and auditors, and company service providers in terms of what are their obligations under the new guidance and the laws which are applicable. So there were 4 key steps which was notified in all the circular. What was the responsibility of DNFBP that needs to be done. But one specific thing which they clearly specified was that before 31st March, all the entities which are having this applicability should register on GoAML platform. And my purpose is today to take you through how that process will work. We are conducting multiple seminars with the ministry themselves. In fact, on Monday and Tuesday, again, there are awareness session which we have planned along with them for the general specific sectors of real estate and dealers and profession. Now, the first step is appointing a compliance officer. There are, if you follow the cabinet resolution and number 10, there are specific guidelines which have been told that how a compliance officer role should be, what is their qualification, how they can be appointed or nominated within an organization, as well as how you can outsource some of the activities to a third party, depending on the function which you are planning to outsource within the compliance department. So that is one area I would encourage everyone to review, because some of you may fall under this and some of you may need the compliance requirement. So Article 19 and 21 focuses on those specificities. With regards to compliance officer, they will be acting as point of contact. One of our colleagues actually asked this question, that whether all the auditors have to be registered. The answer is that you will have an internal STR process. If your junior auditors or senior auditors are notifying, they should notify it to their compliance officer. The compliance, along with the senior management, prepares the documentation, prepares the file for submission. If he gives a go ahead, then he files the, along with the CEO of the company, files the report to the GoAML platform. So that's why they have given how the setup has been done. It is very clear that they want the organization and one individual responsible person who will be a point of contact with regards to FIUs, questions and answers once the GoAML platform goes live. Secondly is implementing CDD measures while identifying and verifying the information provided by your current as well as potential customers. So this is very important. You should perform this task, and as part of the CDD, risk assessment is one task which has been notified based on the kind of client you are dealing, based on the kind of nature of business the client has. There should be an internal risk rating process for all the DNFBPs to comply with. As part of the CDD measures, there is also a requirement of screening of the customers against, Mr. Fadli mentioned about Cabinet Resolution number 74, where the DNFBP has to register so that they get the updated list of sanction and UAE blacklist persons. So if any of your customers' name against those list matches, A is internally you should prepare a case, file an STR, as well as also stop the dealing with the customer. This is something which is very difficult because I know there would be a lot of ongoing business. So if the list matches with the sanction, the law clearly says we can't deal with the sanctioned entity. So this is something very important for all of you to comply. And this should be done without tipping off the customers, which is one of the most important aspects of the training which your compliance should foresee with all your colleagues within the organization. Now, this activity has already happened in the last 4 to 5 years in the FI sector, as Mr. Osama mentioned. And now with the DNFBP, it will pick up slowly but steadily, and that is where ministry came into the picture. Third is reporting transaction. Now, GoAML registration will be the first platform through which you can provide all the information. There is a checklist which has to be filled up, information that has to be given, and if you have any audit trail or documentary evidence, you can also provide that. There are multiple platforms to integrate. The FIs are integrating through an API. For you guys, it can be through an XML file format which has been given by the GoAML once you register with them. One of the most important and focus they have been saying is do not tip off the customer while you're reporting, and any regulatory authority it may be, you may have to only focus on that. And the fourth is registration against the sanction list. So these 4 things are very critical for the DNFBP compliance. Quickly going into the thing, why it is important for you, as it was mentioned by Mr. Osama also, that the regulators have started penalizing the entities, especially the FIs. Right now, you would have heard about many cases, including the banking sector, exchange sector, and other sectors. Now, Ministry of Economy has also confirmed that they will be performing risk-based compliance. They are outreaching, they are creating a very strong campaign to register. And if there is non-compliance, they have also outlined within their circular the penalties that may come along with that, which will be it is much easier to comply rather than being non-compliant, is what our message would be, because the fines are quite on the higher side. And then the ministry is focusing that the NFBP take substantial measure. Nobody expects that within 1 year 100% can be achieved, but at least substantial measures should be taken so that we can demonstrate the authority whenever there is an inspection based on the risk-based approach, that the existing AML CFT culture framework within your organization is compliant with the law, and as well as you maintain and follow all the information that is required with regards to the record keeping inspection. Now, going into the GoAML platform, the importance of GoAML platform, the functionality, the applicability, and the accessibility. Now, it is very important for all of us to understand that this has come, as Mr. Fadli mentioned, the law was set up, the FIU was set up. Now they wanted an independent portal which would allow FIU to interact with all the participants who are regulated either in the FI or who are supervised under the DNFBP sector directly with them, and they have the independence to report it to FIU to ensure that if there is any activity which is going is properly reported, and the reputational risk which can be avoided can be based on the action can be avoided. Now, functionality, again, the functionality is only to report the suspicious transaction. There's no other meaning, there's no other training. Although I would highly recommend that if somebody goes on Ministry of Economy website, they have put up a lot of case studies, a lot of videos for you to understand how you should register. We will also take you through some of the screenshots as part of that. The applicability is also for FIs, but here, since our focus is designated non-financial business and profession, so we have focused on that. Now, in the GoAML registration, there are two main stages which are very important for you to clear before you actually go and start reporting. The first registration stage is on the protection system, which is by Ministry of Economy, before you go to actually on the registration process on the GoAML system. So SACM is the platform where you have to focus and get registered first. Once you get the approval, there would be a temporary ID password. We'll take you through the process in detail to quickly cover up those areas. And the second stage is then you go into the GoAML website provided by Central Bank FIU unit. And there you register both your company and the compliance officer or the individual you have designated as a compliance officer. There are certain documentary requirements which are there, but one of the most important document which you will always require is whoever has been nominated or designated as a compliance officer for your organization, there has to be a confirmation letter, undertaking letter, which should be signed by the board or the CEO of the entity or the owners of the entity, to ensure that you have appointed this person, and that document should be updated to the GoAML platform while registering. So in the pre-registration process, as I told, first is the security clearance, SACM, Services Access Control Management. It is a a link which hosts the GoAML production and UAT environment. So here in that, if you see, we have marked the registration process in detail. So as part of the registration, these are the information they will require. They will ask you to identify the supervisory body, understand the organization legal name as per the license issued by the supervisory body. We are using the word supervisory because these sectors are not regulated. These are supervised by different authorities in UAE. So that's why the word supervisory is coming. In FI, we always use the word regulated because there are clear laws, regulation, guidelines against which they cannot avoid. Copy of the trade license number, PDF of valid Emirates ID, and letter of representation in front of the GoAML. So once you provide this information, this is, I don't know whether it is visible, but these are the actual templates which you will be filling up, and all the information has to be filled up on these, including the generation of the entity details and other things. Now, once you do that, there is a successful message with a temporary registration number will come, and as well as there is a Google Authenticator one-time OTP generator, which your owner of the companies or the person has to download to make sure that one-time temporary password is generated before you actually log in into the e-services platform of verification of Central Bank GoAML. Now, quickly in the registration process, I know given the time paucity, I'm just slightly moving ahead, but we can share the presentation for the benefit of the members. GoAML registration process, sign up as an organization is the first step. Then the individual who will be responsible to report on behalf of the organization has to be the second step. And the third is, you will get the access as part of that. So what we have done is we have put a simplified the registration process. Once you sign up on GoAML portal, you have to select the type of registration. Now, if I talk about the type, there is reporting entity, stakeholder, or the supervisory body. Depending on how you fall under, you may register under that. But
Abhishek,
coming back to
just one thing, whatever is important, please cover. It's okay if we are 5-10 minutes overshoot the time, but whatever is important, please do cover. Thanks.
Perfect, no issues. So third is registering your organization, the phone, person, passport details, the attachment, as I mentioned, the attachment confirming the person who is in charge to report as part of the organization detail, the trade license copy, the valid Emirates ID and other documentation, and then the confirmation message comes. what I've tried to do is we have tried to put this actual screenshots which is required, and it will become familiar for you. So this is the GoAML portal to register and subsequently log in. So with the temporary ID which you got from SACM and the other details, you would be able to log in. The portal is utilized first to register as an organization, as we mentioned, and then as an individual. So as part of that, this kind of a form which will come in front of you, we have merged a couple of forms. Obviously, these will be in stages, but for the purpose of presentation, we have tried to bring the registration type and other details together. As part of registration organization, very similar information what you filled at the first time would be required. The phone and the address and other things would be required. Communication details. Yeah. Now, once you do register that, this is where the registering person would be. Now, this is the person who would be providing all the updates on this platform about STR, or who will be reporting the STR, and this will be representing your legal organization. So this is very important that you choose the person carefully and make him understand the responsibility that is there, which we discussed. You can refer Article 21 also, and further you can also refer the supplementary guidance issued for DNFBPs, which will also specify clear guidance. Now, once you upload that, there is a registration info. This column is very important because you will not get automatic approval. Once you submit all the information, the GoAML FIU will be reviewing the information, and then based on the information provided, they will either send you acceptance or rejection by email. And if they send you rejection, again, you have to outreach them and again do the registration process with the right approach. So that support is being provided as we speak. So that is something which can be looked at. Yeah, so as I mentioned, to conclude the GoAML registration process, you may need approval from the supervisory or the FIU, receive the organization ID you will receive once you get the approval done. And then you utilize this organization ID to register the user individual also in the GoAML platform. Now, two important things is there. One is suspicious transaction and suspicious activity. Now, there's a big difference between these two, because suppose you as an organization found out that one of the counterparties you are dealing with is focusing on making a payment in cash without any reason, without any source, and you, since being part of DNFBP or one of your customer wants to do that, so it focuses more on the transaction point of view. The activity focuses that you ask the customers for source of proof document, and the customer is not supporting you, and the activity which he's doing is not in line with his the profile which has been created as KYC, which you create is slightly different than what it should be. Then before actually the transaction has happened, you may look into this suspicious activity report and report. So it is very important for you to understand and report the right format, because quality of the STR is what FIU is always focusing on. It is important to report, but with substantial evidence and other information. Now, for the purpose of this, they have provided a full list of guidelines. If you refer DNFBP and the supplementary guidance for auditors, or for gold, or for precious metal stones, or for your real estate or corporate service provider, there are instances of red flags or instances of indicators which has been provided to focus, ultimately in terms of the compliance requirement, that if you identify such transaction, it may lead to potential money laundering, and then you can report it as part of that. Now, as part of STR SAR procedure, now this is the third stage. One is the pre-registration, registration, and this is the third stage where we are focusing that how you will register, how will you use the platform. So obviously there are certain web reports and all, but one of the most important things which you have to cover is the location, the reason for reporting, and the transaction detail, if at all it is there, and the person entity details. Whatever information you have before establishing the relationship with the customer, if there is a transaction which has happened, you should probably have the KYC and the details of the UBO, the trade license, because you have onboarded the customer in compliance with the requirements, I'm saying. Sometimes for the enhanced due diligence, you may not have all the information and the customer may not be supporting. So please do mention all these reasons as part of the reporting. The more information it is given, it is much easier for FIU also, I think, and also for you to justify why it has been done. This is also very important that people sometimes may misuse the platform. Sometimes, I'm not saying that may use, but why? Because somebody wants to, vent out something and they want to use the platform to report that person or the person entity. That may not fly good, and that may again have repercussions on the person who is reporting, especially the MLRO who is reporting. So it's always advisable that whenever you report, that obligation of reporting is there. So you have to do the proper due diligence before reporting and submitting the details to the some of the real life case examples. As we were discussing, we have taken some of the samples from the ministry guidelines itself, so that the DNFBP can understand. I have not tried to put complicated examples as of now. I've tried to simplify it. So, it will help you to understand how people use multiple platform, to launder the money, and which is and one of the platform can be for real estate, can be through merger and acquisition transaction which are not relating to it, overpricing, just to show the things in the light that things are quite normal. So it's very important for all of us to understand. So in this example, we had taken one of the cases for a Belgian bank where a customer wanted to open an account, and a European was acting on behalf with the cover name of a director of a company. Now, in this, what happens is 3 steps were violated. One is we didn't identify the UBO. So always focus who you are talking. If this is a third party representing a UBO of the organization, it has to be clearly verified and documented and authenticated. It's not that you can't deal. It's just that you have to do proper due diligence on both the third party as well as the entity. So you should onboard the customer. There was a time in the, when sometimes transactions were happening where a third party was coming and doing the transaction on behalf of the company, although the documents were not there. So authorized representative of the company is allowed to deal with, as long as you are able to establish that relationship as part of your due diligence. So even, this is something which is very important for all of you, because this was something, company was only acted as a front merely for the purpose of carrying out this property transaction, but the actual person who was carrying out the transaction was behind the thing, and these representative of the companies were coming forward and doing the transaction. Now we have to understand, if the company is doing such transaction and huge amount of inflow outflow, whether cash or non-cash, is deviation from the profile, we are able to understand. Sometimes when we identify and there are transactions where we see that the proceeds are coming from high risk countries and there is no major justification banking channel on how that money has come, it is very important for be it an auditor or be it from the perspective of being a finance manager in the organization, we should always be vigilant about these things and how these transactions are happening. So again, it is about knowing the responsibility for these compliance officers, educating their customers. And when you deal with customers from a real estate perspective, buying and selling as a brokerage, it's very important to differentiate that only developers are not part of it, or if a company's is buying and selling on behalf of itself is not part of the regulatory requirement. It is always the broker who is acting on behalf of third party to complete the operation of the property is very important to understand that would be required to do. So there are many examples which are there which can be looked at. Second case study, again, somebody wanted to set up a restaurant, and for that they wanted to purchase a real estate with illicit fund. Now, one of the major things in the differentiation between money launderers and terrorist financiers are this, that the money launderers will try to conceal the source of the fund. They will not reveal, or they will try to do multiple transactions, as this example shows, that they will try to use FI units, put cash deposits and other things. But they will try to hide the source. On terrorist financing side, they will never try to hide the source. Source might be legal also, but their ultimate purpose would be to hide the beneficiary of the fund. In this case, they don't want to, in money laundering, they will not ever hide the beneficiary, because ultimately they want the beneficiary to have the fund. In terrorist financing, because the beneficiary would be potentially a terrorist organization and other organization which are acting on behalf of the terrorists, would receive the funds, so they would like to conceal that. Sources may be legal for terrorists, and in this case, sources for sure would be illicit and has to be conducted on the due diligence. Now, when you go into any system, when you see huge amount of cash deposit and against that, purchases are happening, as a real estate company provider, you should always see that if these are high value amount, you should always ask for an authenticated way of getting the money done. You should not accept third-party checks unless a proper due diligence has been done on that behalf. So this is very important. I'm just trying to make it more practical with the case study, because these can be read it through, but what is the conclusion this case study is trying to give? I'm just trying to focus on that. Now, another thing is, we have all heard about drug trafficking and trading in gold, and the gold, going from one country to the other. Actually exporting gold in hard gold is being transported across the borders, because that can be one way of settlement of the payment, because gold can be sold and almost the price would be not that much expensive as against the money which you have to send to that counterparty across the border, who may require a banking channel to set. As you all are aware that bringing any cash above 100,000 in this country, there is a DRIC form at the airport which is applied. So if anybody plans, financial institution who deal in import or export of currencies, always are vigilant, and even the customs have put those controls in place. Similarly, for the golds also, it is very important to declare while carrying golds of amount beyond a threshold. Now, this threshold is something dependent on different jurisdictions and all, because I don't want to bring Africa where the goods are exported and the medium of things, because there is a lot of criminal organization and there is a specific regulation on this from DMCC also, if you follow them, that responsible sourcing of gold and precious metals stone audit, which is also performed so that golds are not, or precious metals are not procured from areas where, for example, child labors are happening, for example, drug, human trafficking is happening. So those countries or those mines should not be put it, and those are actually declared as part of the sanction list and other information which are there. So it is very important that whenever any other form of assets which are being used, a lot of you may be asking about the cryptocurrencies which are also being used. And yes, this is one of the major challenges. The regulators all across the world are trying to come together to see what regulations can provide that. We are seeing a lot of organizations, especially in US. One of the good examples is Tesla, where they plan to invest in Bitcoin and keep assets in that. But in some of the countries, like if you take an example of UAE, ADGM has come out with specific guidelines on how to issue virtual assets, cryptocurrency assets. ESCA has also come out with a certain guideline, but it is still in the draft phase and about to be, in the finalization one. But these are certain things which replaces money and can be easily, used as a channel for money laundering. So whether we are auditors or whether we are real estate agents or brokers, or we run that company, or whether we have gold company, it is very important for us to understand that these are mediums, these are phones, these are just some examples. There are more practical red alerts examples which are already there. You can and is accessible to all of you. So another thing is justification of movements of fund to another jurisdiction. Now, gold is again a very good example. Why we are saying this is because it can be used against settlement of funds. Now, settlement of funds generally is done through banking channel. So suppose you have a counterparty who wants, who you have purchased but against settling anything through the banking route, you are settling them through the gold. Now this brings another aspect which is also picking up is trade-based money laundering, that whenever there are a lot of trades to avoid the import-export duty, to avoid the overpricing, underpricing issues which are there, transfer of the funds, people do conceal these actual information. So it is obviously important for us to be vigilant about it, be it as an auditor, and if we are doing gold and other activity, it is also important for us to focus how we transfer this surplus of information to FIU as and when we notify the information. Now there is another example which covers the wholesale gold trader used, how it is being done. But it is very important that as you are aware, there can be different kind of gold or precious stone metal dealers. It can be somebody who is manufacturing, considered to be low risk, but still has to be registered. A lot of people say that we are just gold manufacturers. Why we need to be? It should be the bullion traders and all. But the clarification clearly identifies who has to be registered. So be it bullion trader, be it somebody who deals above 55,000 has to be there. And even they have mentioned about the manufacturing. Holding companies of such entities are not required. It really depends on the activity which is there to be registered, but holding companies generally are not required. Now, what happens is, gold which originates from illegal origin. Now, this is very important for you to understand that if the golds have come as part of a settlement, or if the gold has been purchased and reaches your wholesaler, the wholesaler will try to push this to the either the selling the gold sales below the requirements. Requirement and customer identification details not recorded. Like for example, if somebody, the regulation says it's not 55 only cash or only bank, it says very clearly that multiple transactions which leads up to 55 should also have important information to perform CDD and EDD of your customers, as well as gold is also paid to avoid this identification recorded, and the payment can be done to the counterparties, company A, company B, and other legitimate buyers in the chain of how to use gold as a platform to do money laundering. Now this is again very important that if you see the bullion traders, they are dealing on a large scale, they are dealing with a huge amount of cash withdrawals. There are cases which has also been reported in the recent past about certain transactions which has taken precedence also, and there has been a regional as well as a global laws which have been there. I don't want to go into the specifics of that, but it is important that as a auditor or as a gold company, you should be vigilant that your platform should not be used sometimes by within your organization to ensure that there is no ambiguity in terms of the implementation. Now with that, I would like to conclude my slide by saying just a reiteration of the point for the auditors and the accountants that A, please register. B, focus on the risk assessment of your customers. That's very important because risk assessment is something which is clearly provided and implemented for all the counterparties. Screening clients and prospective, your existing and prospective clients are also very important. One of the questions was if there is any exemption, do we still need to register? The registration process will still go ahead. On the reporting side, the legal providers have been given certain exemptions because of their confidentiality. But if they, without that particular thing, they still fall under the regulation of reporting. Always identify the UBO of the customers you are dealing. That's a responsibility which is on you, obligation on the DNFBPs. So be it a gold, real estate, or as an auditor or a service provider, always identify the UBOs who you are dealing from the process. And my recommendation is always to start an undertaking letter to ensure that this is done. And with regards to the compliance and the UBO concealment, these are certain things which act as a red flag indicator. So I hope this summarizes what we all have focused on, starting from FATF, National Risk Assessment, as well as focusing on the AML laws, and third is on the GoAML in the registration process. With more practical example, more than happy to answer your questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abhishek. Rajiv, maybe you can.
Yeah. So we have so many questions which are coming up. So I will add up Mr. Nimish.
Yeah,
Mr. Nimish,
maybe I think we can thank
Nimish
Abhishek first before people leave.
Yeah. Thank you, Abhishek, and thank you all the presenters of today. I hope you all enjoyed the session, and it was a very wonderful session by Abhishek. Thank you for enlightening the members very with that topic. We look forward to your continuous support. And probably, I mean, Anisa, we can do the vote of thanks also.
Yes, sir. I think certificate of appreciation is on the screen.
Yeah, certificates of appreciation, Abhishek, for you. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank our principal sponsors, Danu, Shura, Tally, Lulu, and platinum sponsors, Century, Christian Menon, IFCO, AGMC, Chris and Clyde & Co., and media partner, College Times, insurance partner, Delhi Private School, and banking partner, Bank of Baroda. And also thank all the members who attended this event. And over to you, Chairman Saab, for taking the Q&A and other things.
I think Rajiv, you can go ahead.
Rajiv, please.
Sure. So Mr. Nimish Lokhandwala, if you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, I have done that. Everyone can unmute themselves, and once complete, they can mute.
Okay, Nimish sir is not coming up, so we'll.
Nimish Lokhandwala, Balaji, Ma Shabde Saab.
Balaji, if you can.
No, I think everyone should keep themselves on mute. Mr. Mohandas and all others.
Yeah,
when your turn comes, you can unmute yourself, please.
I am on now.
Balaji, you can.
Yes, Nimesh, please go ahead.
So my question is there any incentive for reporting all these STR transactions?
So I think I leave up to the ministry to answer that.
You spoiled everyone, looks like.
Yeah, this is a bouncer for me because I cannot answer this. What is the incentive? But this is something, again, as Mr. Osama mentioned, that the focus is to maintain the reputational risk of the country and to bring investments. It will help the FIU to be more proactive. Now, there is an Egmont principle which is applied across the jurisdiction, which focuses on sharing of information between all the FIUs in the world. Now, what happens is when you start reporting, you may end up, making a huge contribution by saving a lot of, issues which were happening in other part of the world, and it can be connected, and the FIU can safeguard a lot of people, money, as well as, reputation of the country. So
one of our members, Chaitanya, is saying incentive is that our license won't be cancelled. And one thing, whether government gives anything or not, one thing is sure, if Nimesh Lokhandwala, you report this, we will give you a certificate of appreciation from ICA Dubai.
Thanks a lot.
But Anish, one thing, he cannot share with anyone whom he has reported and what he has reported. So.
Yeah.
No, he don't have to share the details. We'll give the certificate of appreciation anyway. So.
Perfect.
But the certificate can be shared, no?
Okay, we'll take offline. Bye. Mr. Balaji.
Balaji, please carry on.
Yes, before I hop on to my question, I just want to add to Nimesh incentive question. In fact, more than incentive, what we must be worried is the penalties. If we give a wrong reporting or suspicious transaction, what would be our penalties? That's what we need. We as professionals should be very careful even before expecting an incentive. Anyway, coming back to my question, this question is either to Mr. Ahmad or for Mr. Abhishek. We were talking too much about CDD, customer due diligence. And even Mr. Ahmad was telling that for this customer due diligence, we have to bank upon the customer himself for all the information. And we sitting in Dubai having international transactions, and the customers at various locations, they are not cooperating. In this case, can we expect the regulatory authorities like JAPSA, DMCC, etc., to pitch in and help with the businesses in establishing in completing the customer due diligence? Something like TRC, now tax residency certificate is being issued. Some certification, for additional fees is given by JAPSA, DMCC will be good. Does AML or any other law of the country is aligned to this kind of certification? Maybe Mr. Abhishek can enlighten us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So just to summarize the question, and then probably I can take up the question in the right way. What you are looking at is like you have customers which are having, presence across the world, and you are part, or your company is dealing with them. And with regards to that, there are certain obligations you as a DNFBP have to ensure that the customer due diligence process has to be followed. Now, sometimes you may not get those information. Sometimes the customer may not provide all the information that is required. So how do you ensure that you are complying with the regulations, or whether the ministry will come out with any specific regulations with regard to that? So the answer is going by the globe. If this is the question, right?
Yes, yes, very much on the dot. Thank you.
Perfect. So globally, if we see, there are corporate registries which are becoming much more open, much more vigilant in terms of declaring the UBO details. There are information which are still not provided, but there are informations where all the UBO details. Even recently, Cyprus has also committed that they will start providing the UBO details as and when asked. Even if you go to BVI, and if your customer has a holding company there are provisions where you can ask for the information through an independent party based on the confirmation to your customer. I don't foresee this, that ministries may involved in this CDD process. It's what I feel as a standpoint. I feel that there are two parties who will be much more active. One is private sector, which will provide you information on corporates or due diligence based on the jurisdiction they come in. And we highly recommend that at least perform enhanced due diligence on customers coming from high risk jurisdiction, as pursued by, Mr. Osama mentioned about it, for high risk country given by FATF. So these are risk assessment anyways has to be adopted by all the DNFBPs. So this would be a right step towards that. So just to conclude, certification may not come into the picture for the global entities who you are dealing with from different jurisdiction, but you may have the leverage of performing CDD and EDD depending on the risk assessment which you perform on your customer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a second question which is coming on from Mayank. Mayank, if you can.
Hi, good afternoon, Abhishek.
Straight to the question, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sure. So just wanted to clarify, currently in the market, there's an issue of interpretation of the term independent accountant and auditors. Does it only qualify the independent auditors, or does it also cover the accounting firms which are only providing accounting services and not the auditing services? And the second inconsistency which comes is in some jurisdictions, you have the license category, which includes auditing, accounting, bookkeeping, and tax consultancy as a single category of license, but those might not be registered with the MOE as auditors. So is everybody covered, or is it only specific to independent auditors for DNFBP?
Thank you for your question. So it's a very relevant point which has been mentioned, that who actually are considered as part of independent accountants and auditors, and what is the definition, whether it covers or not. So with regards to the auditors, it is very clearly given in the supplementary guidance that three kinds of audit who are performing, whether they are registered with ministry or not has not been mentioned. They have mentioned that financial audit, compliance audit, and operation audit. So somebody, let's say a firm performing an internal audit, we recommend them to register, although they may have not received the mailers from Ministry of Economy. Number one. Number two, with regards to your question that in a larger scale, what is independent accountants defined as? So if you read the Cabinet Resolution number 10, Section 3, Subpart 3, it talks about the lawyers, notaries, other independent legal professional, and independent accountant. And when they are considered is when they do any purchase or sale on behalf, support any transaction for real estate, transaction for their clients, they may consider to register for that. If they manage the funds of the clients as part of payroll or other thing, that is example that comes to my mind, they should be part of it. If they manage the bank account on behalf of their client, they also come as part of that. If they are, on behalf of their client selling or buying any commercial entities, they may also come. So there are specific guidelines which are mentioned where, it leaves very little room for interpretation. But yes, absolutely that, a lot of people from ministry got emailers were registered auditors and not other independent accountants, as you rightly mentioned, because they were going by the basis of activity which was there. So you are absolutely right. But if we follow the law and the subsequent implementation procedure, which I have just provided, it would provide the clarity. Happy to share that information with you guys.
So can we take, in that case, even if the license category technically contains auditors, but they don't perform an audit and not doing any of the other activities you mentioned, let's say purely doing an accounting and bookkeeping services, can they take the option of not registering in that case?
I don't think so. If the activity says auditor and ministry's definition for the auditors is clear, it's just that additional to that, who will be there. So whether they perform or not, still they need to register. That is for sure.
Okay.
The activity comes later. First is what is the license you have been issued, whether you are registered as an auditor. So obviously that information is there. In addition to that, they have provided clarification that if you, as an independent accountant or as a bookkeeper, providing certain activities or doing certain activities on behalf of your client, then also you should register, because it will protect you. Because tomorrow the client may not put the obligation, because it is very clearly written in the guidelines that even if you're performing as an organization, giving authorities or to somebody to perform, finally the responsibility lies with the owners only, not with anybody else. Even if you have a third party who is doing the compliance, your employees and all, responsibility is with the owners of the company. So that's something which is very important to.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Fine. So I think we've crossed more than 2 hours, but let's take 2 or 3 more questions from the people who have not asked. So I think we can go to Mr. Sanjay Mehta.
Hi, Abhishek. How are you?
Hi, Mr. Sanjay. How are you?
All fine. All fine. I'm asking very practical questions. Okay. In KYC, suppliers is included, not only restricted to the customer only.
Yeah, KYCC again becomes very important, because what happens is who is the supplier of your customer, and ultimately, the customer may be making, both supplier and buyer of the customers. Customers may be making certain transactions with them. So it may try to hide those transactions and again deal with you. So that's why as part of that, there are certain risk parameters they have given. So top 5 buyers, top 5 suppliers, for example, you can consider while onboarding your customer as part of the customer due diligence. So we recommend that if you come from gold or real estate, you should have a form or an auditor. Generally, all the auditors have those forms and they are doing screening, is what I understand. But for other sectors, it is becoming a new trend. So we always recommend have a form where all these informations can be captured for the supplier and supplier. Yeah.
So supplier and customer both are included in the KYCs, right?
Yes, because you should do the screening. Sometimes what happens, suppose as a gold, you are purchasing gold from a supplier and he is purchasing gold from somebody which is a sanctioned entity or a sanctioned country. So what happens is you become part of that channel of the process and ultimately you are not aware. So to make that vigilant, process more or strengthening that process, this is required to, do more due diligence, especially for EDD, enhanced due diligence.
Yes, and second thing, the multiple license holder, multiple trade license and the single owner. There is nothing like a, group concept, but same compliance officer can work for the multiple trade license when it is owned by the single person, or is it restricted by any regulations? I have not seen it.
No. See, one thing is very clear, that there are 2 things we need to understand. If there is a group entity and they have multiple different entities, you can still, Article 19 of the Cabinet Decision number 10 clearly says that you can still club it together with the reasoning and submit it to the ministry that there would be one compliance officer and all these activity of compliance officer is outsourced to them. But the compliance officer should be part of the group. is what they say it should be employed. If you rely on third party, for example, even Article 19 says about that. If you rely on third party, then again also you have to make sure that the responsibility of reporting remains within the organization. So you should nominate somebody within your senior management to ensure that reporting is done. So branches would be dealt differently. One is the group entities with different license but same owner, you can share the responsibility of compliance. There is even in the guidelines of DNFBP, they have tackled this situation very clearly, that a lot of small organization who doesn't have that many employees, how will they ensure independent audit function? How will they ensure compliance function? So there is certain clarity they have given that you should have segregation of duty. Try not to include the compliance officer with business and sales activity, so that there's no conflict of interest. You may appoint an independent audit party also to make sure that your compliance with the regulations are perfectly done. So it depends on the the nature of the transaction. For branches, anyways, you are aware that it will be the main entity which will register, and for the group entities, 1, 2, 3 different activity license, and if they are falling under DNFBP, you may choose to, Article 19.2 clearly says, if I read and quote, you rely on third party that are part of the same financial group, then you are allowed to, do the CDD, PEP, other screening process. You can share that information, and one person can do that. But still, again, the reporting and the registration would be independent. It will be each license has to register themselves. Yeah.
Another is a non-practical question. So we have discussed this part during the session, that 51% owner, okay, who is not a really owner, and there is no proof that he is not really owner. And something has been mentioned that how many UBO is having a multiple companies. We have to check on that. So 151% UAE national is having a, let's say, he is sponsor in 10 companies. So we have to gather the information of that all 10 companies.
Ideally, the law, it really depends on the implementation guideline, but the circular 50 talks about it, that you should properly do that due diligence. But the information, I don't think the forms which has been provided captures all those information as of now. They are asking for such information, but not that in detail. So my recommendation would be very simple, that when you identify any UBO, obviously the UBO, why it has come is because they want to make sure that whoever is the ultimate beneficiary owner is coming out in the picture. But since the reporting or the MOA or the article for a free zone entity doesn't describe or doesn't clearly specifies how this thing would be, it would be presumptuous for us to declare that no, because the local is 51, he's not the owner. It would be presumptuous. So you have to have documentary evidence. And as I said, once you see these entities reporting it to the regulatory authority, you will have one substantial document to make sure that the UBO which has been declared and given it to the local authority ensures, proper recording of the information.
Thanks, Sanjay ji. Praveen Mehta ji, if you can unmute yourself and ask the question, please. So we'll go a little straightforward in one question, please, so we can have a little more opportunities.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Quickly, questions. In the memorandum and article of association, it's mentioned 51%. It's mentioned profit share, which is higher for the expat. It is mentioned expat is a manager, he has all the powers. So in that case, can we conclude the local is UBO or not?
I would ideally read the document thoroughly, because there are 3 provisions apart from profit sharing and this. I would like to see the shares, in terms of the capitalization of the entity, and also the declaration by the local, whether he says that all the management powers are with them, the other party. Voting
still,
power.
Abhishek, Abhishek, I will say, Abhishek, just one point I want to add, because we are discussing this point. Whether the powers are discretionary or non-discretionary, I have not seen any MOA which is a non-discretionary power. So a local can change these powers anytime in future. So if actually, he can change, he's technically a UBO.
Yeah, absolutely. But apart from this, this is a very important topic. But I would always love to see in the MOA about specific clauses which talks about, let's say, bearer shares. Because what happens is the UBO which we are trying to identify, the expat, we are ignoring that part. A lot of times, and there are case studies which are there on that, that the expat is actually not the UBO. There is somebody else who is the UBO. We are talking about the share local, that is fine, but the real reason why this UBO regulations have come across the world, also you see the declaration and all, is to make sure the expat who is in the front is actually the person who is running the entity, or is actually the person who is the UBO. But having said that, coming back to the point, it's very difficult to give an opinion over the call. Happy to look at the document and give you an opinion on that.
I think in the most
Allow me
cases,
another question,
expect
please.
is only the face just to have the tax planning in place. So
As a seller of a real estate or a landlord releasing estate to various people through brokers, we only receive our manager check, whether in sale or other than rent. How can we see this all regulations for the buyer and lease or our tenant? What is the position in that?
So what is your activity, sir, if I may ask? You are buying and selling on behalf of your own property, is it?
Yeah, my own properties. If I am buying, selling or leasing, what do I do?
No, so you are not part of the regulation. That it is always the brokerage or acting on behalf of third party. If you act on behalf of a customer of yours where you buy and sell, then it applies to you. The law
Thank you very
clearly
much. I
states
appreciate that.
Okay, Sanjay Khetrapal sir, quickly.
Hello. So I got two parts to your question. One is continuing with what Mayank had asked. I think it got muddled where we said that the license includes the word audit. But if the license purely says bookkeeping and tax consultancy, do those companies have to register? Provided they are not doing the activities you had mentioned.
No, that is something which is clear. They have
You don't have to
defined who is
register.
the independent accountant. If you are not performing those activities, you're not allowed to. There's no requirement of registration.
And if one does register, if you start doing this activity, then can we as qualified CA of a sole proprietorship be our own compliance officer?
So if you are managing the business as well as this, there is a guidelines specifies, I think article number 8 talks about governance of small entities and all. So if you don't have people, maybe your finance department or somebody you should designate who is not part of the business is what they have recommended in the guidelines of DNFBP. In that they have specified that. So you can refer that article. I think it is section 8. I'll just confirm it to you. Yeah, section 8, go down for dealings with, I'll get you the exact section. Maybe it's not 8. But there is a specific guideline that how the governance should be done when you are dealing with small entities. Okay. So that is clearly given as part of that.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Abhishek. We'll take it.
I think we have already we were supposed to close at 12:30. It's 1:20. So I think members
Sir,
can
it is
post.
Just one clarification, Mr. Sanjay, it is 8.6 of the guidelines for DFN, 8.6, section 8.6.
Thank you so much.
Now, if members have some specific queries, obviously not in bulk, they can send it to me. I'll divert to Abhishek, and then we'll try to send you the responses. So with this, I think, thank you very much, everyone.
Sir, one last question.
No, sir.
Most of the members are asking.
No problem. So you can send it to me. We will take it. We have already overshoot by 50 minutes. So
okay, thank you.
Fine. So there are members who are saying close it also. So we have both the representation. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining, and see you very soon. Thank you.
Why don't we keep second session?
Thank you all.
Yeah, we will do, definitely we'll do a follow-up session with more case studies. There is a request for that as well.
Yeah,
so we'll do only one session for the case studies.
Before election.
So get the right people.
Before elections. Why is that so?
Because 31st March.
I didn't want it to bring election into this, but you have brought anyways. Anyways, it's fine.
Thank you,
Sure,
Mr.
we will discuss with Abhishek and other people, and we'll get it.
Only effective.
Sorry, anyone
Thank you
wants to
very
say?
much.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the great session.
Yes, Jay, tell me please.
Sir, this is your last event as a chairman, or you are planning one more?
Let it keep it as a surprise.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank